Algebra 1, Lesson 72, we are factoring trinomials, and these are some simpler trinomials just in the form of 1x squared plus bx plus c. So we start off with kind of a riddle. I need to come up with two numbers that add to give me 8 and multiply to give me 12. Well, let's think about some of these possibilities. Okay, let's start with the factors, because finding the factors of 12 is a whole lot easier and less choices than trying to come up with all of the sums that could give us 8, because we could go positive or negative. So let's think of the factors of 12, and we have 1 and 12, we have 2 and 6, and we have 3 and 4. Which means when we look at the sum of this one is going to be 13, sum of this one is going to be 8, and the sum of this one is going to be 7. Meaning this middle one is the one that gives me the sum of 8 and gives me the product of 12, which means A is 2 and B is 6. Now it doesn't actually matter which order we put that in, but we know our factors are 2 and 6. Let's try again. We need a sum of 7 and a product of 6. Well, our products that could give us 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3, meaning that this 1 and 6 is going to give me a sum of 7. So we have an A of 1, B of 6. All right, sum of 8, product of 15. So we have 1 and 15. We have 3 and 5, meaning that 3 and 5 is going to give us a sum of 8. And last one here. A times B equals negative 6, A plus B equals 1. So we find A and B, let's see, that could be a negative 1 and a 6, maybe a negative 6 and a 1, a negative 3 and 2, and maybe a negative 2 and 3. Meaning if we want to try to add to a positive 1, this last one, 3 and negative 2, is going to give me a sum of 1. So we have factors of negative 2 and 3. What this helps us with is we're basically working backwards to figure out how does foiling work, and how do we undo that in order to factor these trinomials. Well, remember that when we factor, or when we multiply out our binomials, we're going to do x times x, giving us x squared, x times 3, which gives me 3x, 2 times x, which gives me 2x, and 2 times 3 is 6. So when we go and combine like terms, we end up seeing that we have 5 and 6 here. So x squared plus 5x plus 6. Interesting to note that with these numbers, 5 is always created by the sum, and 6 is always created by the product of my two numbers, in our binomial. Meaning 5, to get that, I need to add 2 and 3. And to get 6, I need to multiply 2 and 3. This happens every time I have one of these trinomials. So to say it in a couple different ways, and with some color coding, we can see that if we have x squared plus bx plus c, okay, we can split that out into saying that a plus b give us that middle term here. That's the sum. So we have a and b adding to give me that middle term, and multiplying a times b to give me the product, giving me that constant. So let's try a few of these. Okay. And we'll move past this one because we've seen it. So what we're looking at is we are trying to get a sum that gives us 9 and a product that gives me 20. Well, let's see, we could do 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, and we think, oh, 4 and 5 would work because that adds to 9. So we say we have x plus 4 and x plus 5. Let's just check to make sure that we got the right thing, and we get x squared plus 5x plus 4x plus 20. So when we add it up, we do get x squared plus 9x plus 20. Okay, let me erase a little bit so that we don't have all of these lines going everywhere. Okay, so you can see our answer. So we end up seeing, okay, we have that sum and that product, we have plus 4 and plus 5. Okay, they are plus 4 and plus 5 because we need them positive to get a positive 20 and a positive 9. Next one, x squared plus 11x plus 18. Well, 18, the factors are 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Okay, but we can stop there because 2 and 9 would give us a sum of 11. So we would say this is x plus 2 and x plus 9. Okay, and then x squared plus 3x minus 10. Now, this one's a little bit more difficult. So I want to show you this factor sum table that we can use. And so I'm going to write out all the factors of negative 10 and say, okay, we have a negative 1 and 10. We have a negative 10 and 1. We have a negative 2 and 5, a negative 5 and 2. So we look at these different sums and say, well, I get a sum of 9 here, sum of negative 9, a sum of 3, and a sum of negative 3. Meaning that this one right here is my winner. So I say I can split this into x minus 2 and x plus 5. Because we will get that product of negative 10 and those add to a positive 3. Okay, another couple. So you can use that same factor sum table for these. Okay, but negative 6, let's see, we could do something like negative 2 and 3. We could get negative 3 and 2. We could have negative 1 and 6 or negative 6 and 1. Well, that negative 6 and 1 is going to add to give me negative 5, so that is my answer. All right, next one, 8. Well, because that middle term is negative, but my constant is positive, that means that I need to multiply two negative numbers to give me that sum being negative in between. So I could do like negative 2 and negative 4. Okay, that will multiply to give me a positive 8 and add to give me a negative 6. And this last one, y squared minus 3y minus 2. Well, let's think of those factors. We could have negative 1 and 2. We could have negative 2 and 1, and I think that's it. Unfortunately, none of those work. And if we go through all of the factors and none of them actually give me the correct sum, we call this prime. Because there is no way to factor it. We call it prime. Okay? You can work through a couple more of these examples by yourself. I'll just give you some options here. Okay? But what I want to show you is things like this. X squared plus 5x plus 6y. Now let's start off just like if this were a normal trinomial, x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, so if we did that, then I would say, oh, that means that I have an x plus 1, sorry, not an x plus 1, an x plus 2, because 2 and 3 is going to work here, and an x plus 3. Now we're missing something. To get that product of 6y, currently I only have 6, so I must have to do a 2y times a 3y. That gives me a 6y squared. Let's see if it gives me that 5xy as well. And really, I just need to check my middle term. So I get a 2xy, and I get a 3xy. So yes, I get a total of 5xy. And similar with the last one. Okay, x, and we're going to be doing a negative 1 and a positive 3. Okay, so we get a positive 3y and an x minus 1y, or just x minus y. That will give me a product of negative 3y squared, and it's going to add to give me a positive 2xy. Okay, now these last ones here, although they look a little bit different, that's just because they're not in the right order. When we switch them around to put them in standard order, we say it's x squared minus 4x minus 21. So I'm looking for a product to give me negative 21, add to get negative 4. Well, that means I need x minus 7 and x plus 3. And same with the last one, x squared plus 5x minus 24. So I multiply to give me negative 24, add to get 5. That means I have an x plus 8 and an x minus 3. So when you see them in a funky order, just switch them around to have your x squared in front first. All right. And you can try this one as well. Plug it in. But I would encourage you to factor first. It's a whole lot easier to do this and factor first and then plug in your number. Well, I hope this is helpful for your homework and for studying.